also, happy to answer things through the chat as Drew is presenting. So first, just wanted to make sure that you are seeing my main screen controlling complexity.
Yep.
Sure can.
Fantastic. Well, Axonius, first, who are we? We were founded in 2019, and be warned, this is a bit of a silly analogy, but we're much more of a baby shark than a baby panda. We came out swimming ready to attack the world. I won't belabor the point too much, but in our first year, we were named the most innovative startup by RSA. We were also recognized by CNBC, SE Magazine Awards, and Forbes. In 2020, we followed up that success by being given an award at the Defense Magazine InfoSec Awards and being named the best cybersecurity startup at the Cybersecurity Excellence Awards. Sorry, I'm gonna jumble that up a bit there, but you're getting the point, and as I said, I won't belabor it too much. To get into exactly what we were hoping to cover today, just introduce you to the Axonius team, let you know exactly who's covering what sector. We have a number of reps on the phone today just to make sure that we have coverage. Talk through the problem we solve, talk through how we do it, and then the fun stuff of actually showing you the solution. After that, we have a planned Q&A, but as I said, I will try to monitor the chat and answer questions in there as Drew is presenting. I think, we'll jump directly into it. The team, when it comes to the Mid-Atlantic, we have Brad Odell, who I don't believe is on the line today, covering large enterprises. Myself, William Dutro, on commercial, and then Austin, who I know is on the line covering the mid-market segment. So regardless where your business falls in, we have coverage. We are happy to help you, and we would love to, see if you might have some issues that we might be able to help you solve. We'd like to bring up this tweet as it pretty succinctly illustrates the issue that modern security professionals are up against every single day. Candidly, when we're showing this tweet, the only real pushback we get, and we get it a decent amount, is these numbers are a little too close together. But that is exactly what we're hoping to help you solve. To get into exactly what we're trying to help you solve, I don't need to tell you guys that it feels like every year a new security tool is developed. It's finally promising to be the silver bullet in your stack. So why is such a foundational problem like asset management so elusive? Simply put, what's considered an asset has changed drastically in the last 10 to 15 years. It was pretty simple to understand what was on your network in the past. It was generally flat. You could look at Active Directory to get a decent count. You had SCCM and AV as your primary defenses. Now, however, we have a proliferation of asset types, as well as different new tools to both deploy and protect them. We've now moved on to devices like Androids and iOS devices and additional tools to secure them. Then when you start to talk about, single sign-on, the cloud, all of these different applications that are both infrastructure, managing infrastructure, and then securing themselves are getting pretty wild when you're trying to handle it, especially when you're starting to factor in IoT devices. Looking at all of these technologies, it's pretty simple to see where the tweet problem came from. They're all phenomenal technologies. They all help companies function. They help them be secured, but they're a little siloed. The challenge is so complicated that Gartner has actually created a space called CAASM, which is Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management. When you're talking about what we're hoping to help you accomplish, the first thing we're doing is building you a credible, comprehensive, and correct asset inventory. We're able to do this by looking at data that you've already collected, that you already have within your infrastructure, and just organizing it in a much better way when using our different tools, specifically the query wizard, to highlight and expose security gaps. It's pretty simple to see what is in CrowdStrike. You go to CrowdStrike, you look at the list, you have it all right there. It's a lot harder for CrowdStrike to tell you what isn't in CrowdStrike, and that's what we're able to highlight. And the really cool thing is once we're able to highlight those things, we're also able to take action. When it comes to how we're doing it, the deployment is incredibly easy, whatever makes the most sense for you. It can be deployed as a VM either in your infrastructure or in your private cloud, or we can host it. It's completely agentless. As we were saying, we're working with the data that is already within your system. We're pulling from those tools. We don't want to add to the additional agent fatigue and be another resource constraint on already constrained assets. The connectors to the adapters are read APIs. So we're interacting with things in a very friendly way. You know, we're not messing anything up. When it comes to those integrations, we have over 400. That is something that is the lifeblood of our solution. You'll hear me mention it a couple times. Drew are going to mention it a couple times. The adapters are where we're pulling this information. So if you have something within your environment that we're not covering, we are happy to work on it and add it, because it's just going to provide additional value not only to you, but probably some of our other customers. And when it comes to deployment, usually the largest hurdle that we have to pass are, you know, one, provisioning the VM, but two, then just getting the credentials to the systems that you're looking to, you know, feed data to Axonius from. Once we get those credentials, the data starts pouring in incredibly quickly, and you're able to start using that query wizard to start highlighting some of those, you know, great things that we can help you with. When it comes to our most common use cases, specifically for cyber asset management, the tool we're going to be focusing on now, it can be broken up really into two subsections, both asset data and user data. First, looking at assets, we are able to help you with asset discovery, endpoint management, cloud management, configuration management, security operations. You know, I won't read down that slide and go into every single detail, as Drew's going to actually be showing you the solution. It clicks a little better. But you can see a little preview of what we're trying to do with our query wizard to compare these differing devices, show you what solutions are seeing what devices, you know, in terms of asset discovery. Hey, you know, Tenable is seeing all of these assets, but here's another subsection of assets within AD that you were missing from that. When it comes to endpoint management, the example that I had given earlier of CrowdStrike is phenomenal at telling you exactly what is within your environment, but it's not so great telling you what is not within your environment. And we can apply those same type of steps, you know, both the cloud management, security operations, and configuration management. The other, you know, major thing that we can help with within the cyber asset management is users. User inventory, policy management, account hygiene, zero trust reconciliation, and we're doing it in fundamentally the same way. We are taking in all of these different asset sources, asset information sources, the security tools that are already within your environment, bringing them into one place, deduplicating the information, matching it up, and then allowing you to use the query wizard to then basically show where those gaps exist and where you need to be hitting. Or on the flip side, show how well you're doing to tell management, look, if you give us these resources, this is what we're able to do. So look how great this one environment is that we have focused a ton of resources are. These other environments are falling behind. Let's mirror those efforts across the entire organization. And then finally, a separate product, but we are going to touch on it lightly, is Axonius SaaS Management. It's handling things in a different way, but still the Axonius platform's value add is that we are completely agnostic to the types of security tools that are in your environment. We want to be bringing all of the data that you already have into one place, giving you a concise, deduplicated great number. And in the SaaS world, we're showing you what of these SaaS applications are shadow SaaS. What applications are being accessed beyond single sign-on, or hey, this application is approved to be used in our environment, but they have to be going through Okta, they're bypassing it. Or this application is not allowed in our environment whatsoever, and it's completely separate. Security configuration management and spend optimization are also pulling data from different tools. When it comes to the spend, clearly we are going to need a accounting tool, Concur, to be pulling that information. But we're able to highlight the changes, both when you're talking from a security perspective and also, this SaaS application, we're increasing spend wildly year over year. We need to address that we may be a little over our skis here and need to start drawing back that process. Before I hand it off to Drew, at a high level, did we have any questions from this portion of the presentation before we actually started seeing the environment and what it's capable of? Got it. Well, with that, I am going to hand off to Drew. I will start looking at the chat just to see if there were some questions that rolled in, and if it's something I can answer, I'll bring it up to Drew.
Hey, William, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do have a quick question. So you talk about device management and device hygiene. Now, in our industry, that term's a little wide ranging. So when you talk about the hygiene of a device, can you tell me inclusively, what do you mean by that? What does
Certainly, we can tell you. Yeah. So one of the examples that I would use would be validating whether the asset is being seen and monitored by your antivirus, and then highlighting the assets that are not being seen by that, so you know that, hey, we need to deploy agents to these, we need to run scans on these assets as they're not currently being covered. We're able to set, using our queries, basically a number of parameters to set an ideal state for an asset, and then if an asset deviates from that state, we can then highlight it.
So if an asset hasn't been updated in 2 years or something like that, can you define that? Can you tell the manager that this device is out of date, it's out of compliance, et cetera?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Stop the share. Sorry about that, Drew.
There you go. I was just waiting. Okay, Will, can you see my screen?
Yep, we got you.
Excellent. So my name is Drew, and I'm going to walk you through demos of our two products. This one being the, starting with the, what do we call it? The CAASM product, right? The our attack surface management, if you will. Asset management is what we used to call it until Gartner gave it that fancy name, and I kind of like the Gartner name as well. What you're looking at is I've logged in, I'm on the dashboard, and we can see right here in my device discovery column, my sources of data. So let me take you back a step, because Will talked about, we're going to bring the data together and make it available to you. We have these conversations with people all the time. You know, how do you discover this kind of a gap, whether it's missing agents, things that are not being scanned, whatever the gap is? We ask them to walk us through the process, and it almost invariably boils down to, well, it's a manual process. And we look at one source of data and we compare it to another and maybe a third and maybe more than that. So it's very much a stare and compare, if you will. And at the end of it all, you know, they would say it's manual, it's tedious and time consuming. It might involve multiple people from multiple teams, and generally not fun. And we don't do it as much as we'd like to because of all of that. But the other thing we pull out of that is, you know what? It's not that you didn't have the data. You did have the data. You just had to compare it across 4 sources. If all of that data was in one place and something gave you a way to compare those sources very easily, you'd be in a better position and you might do it on a regular basis. That's where this is going. So these are my sources of data. And as I roll over them, I can see I've brought in data from McAfee, ePolicy Orchestrator, Tenable SC, Cisco Meraki, Forescout, AD, and so on. We can see the numbers of records that we've been able to fetch from these devices. And so altogether at the bottom here, here's what this is showing me. I've got 11 tools that I rely on in my environment. We just saw the list up above. We were able to fetch from those tools 203,000 total records about things in my environment. So, you know, 10, 20,000 records per tool. Now, some of the tools contain duplicate records for whatever reason. There were multiple entries made, whatever got you there. We've been able to deduplicate at that source level. In fact, that's why you see 2 numbers up here sometimes. So the high number in parentheses is the total records that SCCM gave us. And then Axonius looked at that data and it determined I really only see 20,851 unique devices in this larger data set. So we've collapsed it down to the unique devices per source. And those numbers all together add up to 200,692. It is from this point that our proprietary correlation engine kicks in. it compares these 200,000 records across the 11 sources, and post correlation, we arrive here. This inventory has a total unique device count of 40,363 records. That's the real secret sauce. It's kind of buried in there. What we're going to be able to do with it is really sort of groundbreaking. But to get to this point was a really heavy lift, because every one of those sources had a different format of the record that we had to be able to recognize. They had different fields. They had different names for the same field, right? Some called it IP, some called it IP address, some called it machine address, whatever. Axonius has figured all of that out. You just have to use what we call our adapters to connect to your source tools. We'll fetch that record. It's a read-only one-way pull of data. We're going to pull it into Axonius. Axonius is going to do the magic of deduplicating, correlating to arrive here. Once it's done that, I come over to our device page, and here we're going to see the list of devices. So every row on the screen represents one device in this inventory. The icons that you see, that's a little window, it's a little hint. Here's the source of the data. So for the row that I'm hovered on, and basically every asset on this screen, I can see I've got a record from AD, one from Iraqi, Forescout, Eclipsium, EPO, and so on, and Tenable at the bottom there. So I've got fantastic context on these assets because I've got the data from these, 6 or 7 data sources all together in one place. And this is that list of 40,000, different things. If we drill into one, I'm able to look at this asset and see the data from the individual source. So if I click on McAfee, this is the data that McAfee gave us. And I can do it for Tenable and any of these other ones. Notice Tenable tells me installed software, and it can tell me obviously the vulnerability data that I care about. Here on the aggregated tab, if you said, hey, Drew, I don't want to look at it at the source level. I just want to know the knowledge on this asset. Give me everything you know in one place. That's this aggregated tab. And so here, I'm not focusing on the source of the data. I'm focusing on this asset. What do we know about it? This basic info page has stuff like the host name, a lot of OS data. I can see who the users were that was reported by some source. And then you can see on the left here, I've got a little index. What network interfaces do I have in terms of MAC address and IP? I can see that. And anytime you see icons in Axonius, that's just that little indicator. What is the source of this data? Well, it's pretty much all of my tools knew the MAC and the IP. I can see installed software, what agents are running on this, and what are the versions of those agents. So the question earlier about hygiene, am I at one of the most recent versions of the agent? Is the agent talking to its manager? I'm going to be able to answer those kinds of questions. So the last thing I want to say about this piece here is every field that you see here, whether it's on the aggregated page or adapter page, is available to me in our query tool that we call the Query Wizard. And this is where the magic really happens. When I go into the Query Wizard, let's think about a use case, okay? I can see that I use McAfee. I see a lot of Windows systems. My policy probably says every Windows system is supposed to have a McAfee agent on it. So let's start there. I'm going to find the field that contains the Windows data, OS type. So let's start there and just say, starting from a foundation of only Windows systems, and we can see my 40,000 devices has dropped to 22,300. These represent Windows. Within my Windows devices, I got one other field I want to put in here, and that is the notion of currency. When did I last see this thing on the network? And I'll use 30 days. Here's what I'm doing. I'm prioritizing my response. What we're saying is things that have been seen recently, 30 days, 15 days, 10 days, choose your number. I don't care what you choose. Those are the ones that have been seen in the recent past. And if I'm about to go tell somebody else, hey, you have to fix this, I only want to bother them with the ones that are actually living on the network, because some of your inventories of data will have old and archived, records on archived machines. And that's okay. There could be some value to that data. But right now, I want to filter those out. If it hasn't been seen in 60, 90, 1 year, 2 years, I'm not going to try and tell somebody to install an agent on a system they might not find. I'll keep the data in Axonius, but for this purpose, I think this is where I want to go. Now, notice my Axonius icon here. Remember, I talked about the aggregated data set versus the individual sources. So up here, when I asked for OS type and last seen, using the aggregated data set is kind of like saying, I want to know the answer to this question, and I don't care who has the answer. Just give it to me. So everybody knew it was Windows, right? The last seen could have been seen by anything. And here's the thing. I don't care if it was Tenable or McAfee or Forescout. As long as anything saw it within the last 30 days, to me, that represents a recently active asset, and that's good enough. But I'm going to change now over to McAfee for this third condition. And this condition says, show me which ones we've got a McAfee record from. So how did we get our data? We reached out to the McAfee EPO console and said, through the API, give us copies of your records. So we know what McAfee knows, and McAfee could tell you this too. Okay, that's not groundbreaking. And we can see I've got 22,202 results. This data set represents active Windows hosts with the McAfee agent. But what I can do in Axonius is negate that third condition. And I'm now looking at the 98 active Windows hosts that don't have McAfee. Notice the McAfee icon no longer in the picture here. So this is a very valuable query to us. This is the first major gap that we've uncovered. Now, what will my customers tend to do at this point? This is not the last time I'm going to care about this. Let's save the query. I'll call it missing EPO. How's that sound? And today's date, just so you know, there's nothing up my sleeve. Beware the Ides of March, by the way. Okay, so we've saved our query. Here I have the list of saved queries. We can see the one that I just saved, and it's all the conditions we expect. So we know what that says. Well, we can take this a step further. Now that I know what I want to look for, the thing that my customers really struggle with is finding that gap. Once they know what to fix, they've already got a process. Maybe they got a ticketing system that feeds this to the right person. And the process is, yeah, identify, once you're told which machine to fix, go out, push the agent, whatever. So we've solved the front end of that, the hard part, and we've given them very concrete results. But I can take this up a notch with the enforcement center, and here I can introduce some automation to this process. And so we build what we call an enforcement set, but in very simple terms, it's a triggering event followed by an action you're going to get to choose from a library of actions. I'll start with the trigger. The trigger is going to be that query that I just saved. And we know what that says, right? Find the active Windows hosts that don't have the McAfee agent. I can put this on a schedule of my choice, but let's just say run this every day. Once a day, after we rebuild the inventory by fetching new records from all of the sources, I want to look and see if this query has any matching records for that condition. How many things are missing EPO that are Windows? And what do I want it to do with that information? Starting very simply, we could just send this as an email. Email the EPO person or the desktop administrator, whoever that is. Here's the list of 98 things that need EPO. Please get on it. Many other actions of what we call a notify type. I could push this information out to a Slack channel or to a Teams, group as well. Taking it up a notch, we could create a ticket, right? If you're using ServiceNow, Jira, one of these kinds of systems, we can automatically create the ticket that says, here's the systems that need McAfee EPO. There's 98 of them. And now ServiceNow is going to figure out who that goes to and track it till it's completed and so on. And if the ticketing system you really prefer is not in this list, you can generally email a ticketing system in today's world and it will create a ticket as well. So I always like to come back to that for that reason. It's got dual purpose. So if we were to send an email or create a ticket, we're not just automating the sending of the email. We have automated building this inventory and keeping it up to date every day. You're not going to do this, once a quarter and then it gets stale, like some sort of a pen test result or whatever. You're going to have an up-to-date inventory every day. We're going to automate looking for this gap in any of the gaps you choose. And we're going to automate getting those results only if there are results into the hands of somebody that's in a position to work on that. So there's a lot of automation. It's kind of like we got the ball up to the goal line and handed it off. Now, if you have people working in an office setting or connected to the network and you can actually reach their machines, then we actually have a hook that would let you deploy files and run commands, which means go ahead and try and install that agent. But I caveat that, and I don't want to improperly set the expectation. You would have to be able to reach the machine. If they are working from home and you can't get to the machine, then I don't expect this to work. And that's the challenge. So that's what we call an enforcement set. Some other interesting use cases along the same kind of lines. Let me reset this. We see a lot of customers that are moving their workloads off to the cloud. So I have an adapter to AWS, and I can see I've got 2,976 assets in AWS. Am I scanning them? Well, these ones at the top, I can see again, McAfee and Tenable type of icons. I've added a second condition, Tenable ID exists. So these 2,260 are in AWS and Tenable knows about them, has scanned them. Just like before, I'm going to click the not on that. And I'm now looking at 716 AWS assets unknown to Tenable. Did we miss a subnet in our scan, configuration? I don't know. However we got here, but I do know the answer. And just like before, I can save this query. I can create an enforcement set that says, give this information to my Tenable team and say, here's the ones that we're not currently scanning. I need you to please get onto that. And within the enforcement center, we had some interesting actions related to this, right? I wouldn't have to necessarily go the email or ticketing route. I could come down here and say, you know what? Add these IPs to my Tenable configuration. And then Tenable is going to automatically fix that. So I don't really have to introduce any other people into the loop. I don't have to, send it through a human to get this fixed. We have a hook right back to Tenable to fix that. Another very popular integration is helping with CMDBs. So we have an adapter, and let me talk about adapters again for a moment. 438 we see here. This is the number of integrations that we know how to get data from. Remember, adapters are one-way pool of data from the source. And within this list, just to give you a sense, all kinds of Microsoft things, Active Directory, Azure, Intune, BitLocker, ATP, SCCM. There was an earlier question about some network-based stuff. We have lots of network-based adapters. And within the Cisco world, I can get switch and router data. I love getting network data. I can run use cases around what are devices that are known only to the Cisco and nothing else knows about them. Those are immediately suspect to me. They are either absolutely brand new or quite possibly rogue devices, right? Or could be an IoT device, and that would explain why it's not in McAfee and it's not in Active Directory. That's okay. We've got solutions for that too. I can tag those things as known devices and say, you know what? I understand the known ones. Don't show me the ones that contain that tag. So it stops causing me a headache. The other thing I could do is if I wasn't Cisco based, I can look at the categories of adapters and say, show me everything in a networking perspective. And we're going to see Aruba's in here. We're going to see Juniper and Palo Alto and all the different networking technologies that are great sources of data about what's happening on the network. And when you compare what the network knows to what your other things know, you quickly find those gaps. Okay, so I was talking about adapters. Oh, I know why I went here. CMDB. We have an adapter to things like ServiceNow CMDB. So I can bring in what it knows about. And then with the query wizard, just like you've already seen me do, I could say, show me anything we know about, but there's no CMDB record. ServiceNow doesn't know about it. This becomes, an easy way to identify things that need to get put into the CMDB. I could also create a query that says, show me things that are in the CMDB. So I have a record from ServiceNow, but nothing else seems to know about it. What is that? Those are quite possibly legacy records in ServiceNow, but the asset's long gone. We've taken the record out of McAfee. Tenable doesn't see it anymore. We took the record out of AD, but we got these lingering records in the CMDB. If you want a way to clean that up, this could very much help in that process. Last thing I'll say on this particular platform is you can build dashboards, right? So you saw me save a query. And in fact, this first chart is exactly what you saw me build. We went down the path of Windows machines, they were active in 30 days, they had McAfee. If I save that query, that's the blue side of this pie with 22,000. Then I click the not, which ones do not have McAfee. That's the red side, that's the 98, the little red sliver right here. And so I can keep my finger, on the pulse, or I can show this to executives if they want that high level overview. My Windows coverage with McAfee, here it is for Linux. It was just a simple swap, change the OS from Windows to Linux, and I've got 2 more queries and another chart. I can find broken agents out there. Back to the hygiene question. What is a broken agent? It's not communicating to its management console on a timely basis. So if I look at my query, I started with Linux systems seen recently in the last 10 days. Here, McAfee knows about them. They were previously properly configured. That was all good. And if you ask McAfee, it would say, yes, I know about these assets. But at the bottom here, when I look at when has McAfee last seen it, has McAfee not seen it in the last 30 days? I come up with these 2 assets. So let me show you what I'm seeing. Right here, this is Azure. Azure saw this asset 2 days ago. It was on the network. Tenable SC saw it about 5 days ago. McAfee has not communicated or talked to this thing since February 6th. It's been over a month. That is why I'm calling this a broken agent. We are not getting our value out of McAfee because I know McAfee updates pretty much daily. So something went wrong. The agent process got hung. Maybe it was disabled. Whatever the case is, we've got a problem and we need to, rectify that. And it's the same story down here. This thing was seen yesterday by Azure, but hasn't talked to McAfee since February 2nd. So that's part of our agent hygiene. I don't know, am I out of time here? Can I go a couple more minutes?
Yeah, you can round it out.
Okay. Oh, well, I'm going to pivot off of that product. The other product that Will talked about, our newest offering, is our SaaS management platform. I want to make sure I'm still logged in. Of course I'm not. Gotta love security, right? So, totally different problem space. The situation here is you're, buying and consuming software as a service. And the questions that we're really solving here are, we want to discover what's being used by our employees, whether it's, sanctioned or unsanctioned. We want to make sure that those things are configured correctly. And I want to identify, what are we really paying for? Because we want to determine ultimately, is this a good use of our money? There could be unused services out there, which is wasteful spending. There could be multiple services which have overlapping features, and in effect, we're paying for the same thing multiple times for whatever reason. So very quickly, just to paint a picture, this product uses a similar approach of connecting adapters to the tools and the cloud services you know about. But we've got multiple discovery methods. What you're looking at is what's known in my environment. And you can see, right, it kind of jumps out at you. Okta, very big, very central to our organization. Google Workspace is another one. And the connecting lines in here showing all the other apps that Google is communicating with and basically sharing data. And that starts to get to some of the concerns. Now, within this data set, I've got what we call managed apps. These are expected, we're paying for them. They're properly configured. We have a site license or some sort of bulk license with this. It's SSO enabled in most cases. And that's what you know about and what you want to see. Then there's the other side of this coin, the unmanaged ones. These are apps that are out there, and there's sort of 2 primary groups. This group down here, unmanaged, but connected back to our Google Workspace. So the users of these apps somehow, are leveraging their Google. This could be, things that we learn through Google Chrome extensions that go out to these things. The talk track around the discovery methods, I don't think I have time for it today, but it's pretty interesting talk. Some of the things I see down here, things like Dropbox, right? If that's not a corporate standard, and it's probably not, immediately begs the question, who's using this and for what purpose? And what data are they sending to Dropbox from our organization? And we could drill into that, right? Because I've got other pages here about the specific applications, users, and so on. This group up here, similar in that they are unmanaged, but they're not connected back to our infrastructure. And these could be things that, people maybe used a corporate credit card and purchased the services and they're using it, but probably not sanctioned. And we want to dig into that deeper. One other simple example, I'm going to drill into users. I can see here 650 total users in my environment. Per user, I can see which apps they're using or have access to. I can see the count per app up here. And just one little simple example, I'll drill into, say, O365, Office 365, because I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And within here, I can see, do I have any inactive or unused accounts? And the truth is, I've got 229. So what is the concern here? Well, these are people we've doled out licenses for to use O365, and they don't appear to be using it. Maybe we can reclaim those licenses and give them to different users. Maybe we can renegotiate our contract to say we need 200 fewer licenses than we're paying for. So that's just one example of where this is going. But in all of this, it begs the question, do we really legitimately use all these apps? What is the data that's going there? Is it properly configured as an app? Is the data properly secured? And we'd love the opportunity to have a deeper sort of a conversation with you on these products. So I know what I'm standing between you, and so I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Advance.